The sinking of the Titanic, 1912. More than 1,500 souls. Gone in one night. April 15th, 1912. The RMS Titanic, the largest, most luxurious ship ever built, was slicing through the cold waters of the North Atlantic when it struck an iceberg. The collision wasn't explosive. It was quiet, deceptive. But beneath the surface, steel was torn apart like paper. Designed to be unsinkable, the Titanic carried just 20 lifeboats, enough for barely half its passengers. As icy water rushed in, chaos took over. Class lines dissolved. Families were separated. Lifeboats launched half full. And within 3 hours, the mighty vessel broke in two and vanished into the sea. The world watched in horror. Newspapers screamed. Survivors were haunted. Outrage followed. But so did change. New international regulations demanded enough lifeboats for all. Around-the-clock radio watch became mandatory, and the International Ice Patrol was formed to prevent future collisions in iceberg zones. The Titanic didn't just sink, it shattered illusions of safety, rewrote maritime law, and reminded humanity that nature doesn't bow to design. And yet, it was only the beginning, because in the decades that followed, ships would face worse storms, colder decisions, and even darker fates. MV Wilhelm Gustloff, 1945. What if the worst maritime disaster in human history happened, and almost no one remembered? On January 30th, 1945, as Nazi Germany crumbled and chaos consumed Eastern Europe, over 10,000 people, most of them refugees, boarded the MV Wilhelm Gustloff. Their hope? Escape from the advancing Soviet army. Mothers carried infants. Wounded soldiers leaned on stretchers. Children clung to any promise of safety. But just hours into its journey across the icy Baltic Sea, a Soviet submarine fired 3 torpedoes that struck like a death sentence. Within 60 minutes, the ship was gone. An estimated 9,000 lives were lost, swallowed by freezing black waters. Entire families perished. The sea became their grave. And yet, almost no one outside Europe knows this story. Why? Because it was eclipsed by the final months of World War II. With Berlin burning and borders collapsing, the sinking faded into silence, overshadowed, unspoken, nearly forgotten. But the numbers speak louder than memory, more than the Titanic, more than the Lusitania. The Gustloff stands alone in sheer human loss. And still, there are more untold shipwrecks buried beneath history's waves waiting to resurface. So keep watching, because the next one, it's somehow even worse. The Halifax explosion, 1917. What if the loudest explosion the world had ever heard wasn't a bomb, but a boat? It was December 6th, 1917. In the icy port of Halifax, Nova Scotia, 2 ships crossed paths. One carried relief supplies. The other, the SS Mont Blanc, was packed with explosives, TNT, benzol, and picric acid. A small miscalculation, a scrape of metal, and then silence. For one fleeting moment, time stood still. Then came the fire, the smoke, and 20 minutes later, obliteration. The explosion shattered windows 50 miles away. It leveled 2 square kilometers of city. A 60-foot tsunami followed, and when it was over, 2,000 people were dead, 9,000 injured, and a city had been erased from the map. This wasn't just a maritime accident, it was a wake-up call, a lesson written in ash and debris. Never again would explosive cargo be allowed near civilian ports without rigorous control. And yet, even after Halifax, more silent killers at sea would follow, ships hiding disasters in their holds, waiting to erupt. Stick around, because the next catastrophe on this list might be one you've never even heard of. The Doña Paz disaster, 1987. What if the deadliest peacetime maritime disaster in history wasn't caused by a storm, but by a spark? December 20th, 1987. The MV Doña Paz, a Philippine ferry meant to hold just over 1,400 passengers, was sailing calmly through the Tablas Strait. On board were families heading home for the holidays, children asleep in their bunks, workers returning from the city. Then, impact. An oil tanker, the MT Vector, collided with the ferry. Within seconds, gasoline ignited. The sea didn't just swallow them, it burned them alive. Survivors leapt overboard to escape the flames, only to find the water itself ablaze. The scale was unthinkable. Over 4,000 lives lost, possibly more. Entire passenger lists vanished. Most victims were never recovered. Worse still, there were barely any life jackets. The ship was catastrophically overcrowded. Safety checks? Ignored. Vector's license? Expired. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was negligence on fire. Doña Paz became a searing indictment of corporate carelessness and failed oversight, a disaster so massive it almost disappeared into disbelief. But this wasn't the last time shortcuts would kill at sea. Stay with us, because the next catastrophe changed everything from ship design to survival strategy. The Sultana disaster, 1865. They survived war, starvation, and prison camps, only to die in peacetime on their way home. April 1865. The American Civil War had just ended. Union soldiers, thousands of them, were finally heading north to freedom. The Sultana, a Mississippi River steamboat built for 376 passengers, had over 2,000 souls crammed aboard. Most were emaciated, wounded former POWs. On April 27th, as the paddle wheeler pushed against the swollen river current near Memphis, its overworked boilers exploded, one by one. The night sky lit up with fire. The ship split apart, its decks collapsing into the river. Screams echoed as flames met water. Some drowned, others burned. An estimated 1,800 died in a single night. But here's what made it worse. It never should have happened. Investigations revealed the cause wasn't just mechanical failure, it was corruption. The captain had taken bribes to overload the vessel. Safety warnings were ignored, repairs were rushed for profit, and yet barely anyone remembers it. Overshadowed by Lincoln's assassination and the end of the war, the Sultana tragedy faded from headlines almost as quickly as it happened. But the river remembers, and so should we. Coming up next, another overlooked disaster, one that redefined maritime safety standards across an entire continent. MS Estonia, sinking, 1994. The sea was cold, black, and unforgiving, and within minutes, it swallowed a ship whole. It was September 28, 1994. The MS Estonia, a passenger ferry crossing the Baltic Sea, was battling rough waters. At first, it was just a tilt, then a tremble, then panic. The bow visor, the very structure designed to shield the ship, ripped away under pressure. Seawater rushed in through the open car deck like a torrent. Within an hour, the Estonia capsized and vanished beneath the waves. Out of 989 souls on board, only 137 made it out alive. The rest, hundreds of men, women, and children, were lost in the darkness. The cause? A catastrophic design flaw in the ship's bow construction. But the real shock came afterward. This wasn't just a freak accident. It was a structural vulnerability shared by dozens of similar ferries across Europe. The disaster forced a sweeping overhaul of maritime regulations. Doors were redesigned, inspections became stricter, evacuation drills were revamped. The message was loud and clear. If one weakness can cost 852 lives, no ship is safe until every flaw is found. The Estonia didn't just sink a ship, it reshaped Europe's definition of safety at sea. And up next, a wartime ship packed with refugees, struck down in minutes. Don't miss the forgotten story few ever talk about. SS Kyangya explosion, 1948. It happened in a flash, and then silence. No SOS, no headlines that lingered. Just smoke, water, and an unspeakable number of lives lost. On December 4, 1948, the SS Kyangya was navigating the murky waters near Shanghai, crammed with thousands of refugees trying to escape China's civil war. It was overcrowded, unstable, and desperate. Then, without warning, the ship exploded. Whether it was a leftover wartime mine or a catastrophic boiler failure, no one can say for sure. What is known is this: the ship split, sank, and dragged up to 4,000 people down with it. One of the deadliest maritime disasters in history, and yet barely remembered. No full passenger list, no international inquiry. The chaos of war swallowed both the evidence and the grief. Survivors' voices were lost in political noise, and the Kyangya was buried not just in the riverbed, but in forgotten history. But here's the question: how many more tragedies like this have been lost to time? And what happens when disaster strikes in the shadows? Conclusion: each of these maritime disasters didn't just claim lives. They revealed systemic failures in safety, design, communication, and sometimes basic human decency. From the Titanic to the Kyangya, from war zones to peacetime routes, the sea has demanded a high price for every mistake. But in every wreck, there was a lesson: stronger regulations, better technology, safer ships. History doesn't just mourn the dead. It listens to their final echoes and tries, however slowly, to do better. Which of these maritime disasters shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most powerful events.